A dry sound echoed from the scanner. "Beep green." But instead of being allowed through, a hand stopped her, cold and final, like a steel door slamming shut. Dr. Naomi Ellington, 47, lifted her eyes, the glow of the electronic board above reflecting in her calm, deep gaze. "Sorry, further verification is required." The voice of Heather Connolly, the 35-year-old gate supervisor, was rigid, like an order delivered inside a prison. No explanation, no trust. The line of passengers behind began to murmur. A man shook his head and whispered, "Must be a scanning error. She doesn't look like a first class." That murmur was not just noise. It was a blade cutting through the air, cutting into pride. Naomi stood tall, outwardly composed, though her heartbeat pounded inside her chest. She wore a light grey linen blazer, simple low heels, her hand holding a phone, displaying a boarding pass clearly marked Seat 1A. An ordinary woman, perhaps too ordinary for the polished world of first class. And that was their mistake. Heather leaned toward her colleague, her fingers pounding the keyboard like a prosecutor building a case. "Too many cases of illegal upgrades today. I need to check again." The scanner beeped green a second time. Clear, undeniable. But Heather frowned, as though the machine itself had betrayed her. In the crowd, suspicious glances pierced Naomi from all sides. A middle-aged woman whispered, "Are we sure she actually bought that ticket?" A young man scowled. "People like this hold up the whole flight." Those whispers were not just doubts. They were verdicts, silent judgments from people who had no idea of the truth. Naomi drew a long breath. She remembered being 20, hearing the words "step aside" for the first time. For years she had been pushed out of boardrooms, out of seats, out of opportunities, simply because they believed she did not belong. And today, the words returned like a ghost. "Please step aside." Heather's voice, slow and deliberate, hammered another nail into the coffin of dignity. Naomi looked at the clock on the wall. 9 minutes until the door closed. She smiled faintly, thin as a blade. "I will stand here." Her voice was gentle, but every word hit the concrete floor like stone. "You can resolve this right here." The silence thickened. A mocking laugh rose from behind, and Heather's face flushed red. At that moment, the door to the jet bridge opened. Captain Marcus Hargrove appeared, dressed neatly in a navy jacket, golden stripes on his shoulders. His eyes swept over Heather, then Naomi. A flicker of hesitation, brief, but enough for Naomi to know. He too doubted her. "What's the issue?" Marcus asked, his tone clipped. "The ticket shows signs of fraud," Heather replied quickly, pride flashing in her eyes, as if having her superior present confirmed her authority. Naomi raised the boarding pass on her phone, the glow illuminating her calm face. "You can scan it again." Marcus nodded. The scanner lit green for the third time. No room for argument. Yet Heather's voice stayed cold. "Payment method, please. Too many have been using corporate cards that are not their own." Another invisible strike. Not just suspicion, but accusation, stripping dignity in front of dozens of strangers. In Naomi's mind, images flooded back. Thousands of invoices approved with her signature, billions of gallons of fuel flowing through the network she oversaw. Contracts bearing her name. Naomi Ellington, chairwoman of Ellington Aviation Group, an entire industry behind her, and no one here knew it. She did not reveal it. Not yet. Instead, Naomi stood still, like a monument. Every doubtful glance, every whisper spread around her. She felt the sting of humiliation, of anger, crawling under her skin. Yet her face remained unmoved. A young man in line sighed. "I have a connection to catch. Hurry up." Marcus turned to the crowd. "Please be patient. First-class security is our priority." Naomi smiled again, this time with meaning. "No, it is you who are delaying." Heather bit her lip, gripping the scanner tightly. Marcus glanced at the clock. 8 minutes left. He leaned closer to Heather and muttered, "If this doesn't resolve, call security." Naomi caught every word. Security. The sound fell into her ear like a swan, but instead of fear, a strange calm spread through her. They did not know that a single call from her could keep this plane grounded on the runway, no matter how loudly its engines roared. In the crowd, a young woman raised her phone, recording, her voice trembling into the mic. "Look at this. 3 green scans and she is still blocked. I'm posting this on TikTok." Naomi tilted her head slightly at the sound of the click, a spark flashing in her eyes. They thought they held the power. But the real power was standing still, right in front of them, in the figure of a woman they believed did not belong. Naomi Ellington stood firm, surrounded by suspicion and prejudice. But with a single touch of her phone screen, the airline's entire schedule could be rewritten. And when that happened, they would all understand. The woman they tried to diminish was the very one who kept their planes in the air. The murmurs in the boarding line spread like a small flame catching on dry straw. A middle-aged man cleared his throat loudly, making sure the whole area heard him. "Her, in first class? She doesn't look the part." The words were a spark, and a few chuckles followed immediately. No one said the words "doesn't belong," yet Naomi felt every blade in their eyes, in their breaths, in the fleeting contempt across their faces. Heather Connolly gripped the scanner tightly, as though she were the gatekeeper of the entire upper world. "We've seen too many cases of fraud," Heather announced, her voice pitched for the crowd to hear. "Plenty of people take photos of other tickets and reuse them. I need further verification." The scanner beeped green for the 4th time, yet Heather still leaned toward her colleague, whispering words that carried no trace of Naomi's name, no shred of respect. Naomi looked up at the wall clock. 7 minutes left. Time no longer flowed normally. It tightened, stretched taut like a string pulled to breaking. Each passing second, she heard her own heartbeat mingling with sighs, complaints, and the impatient tapping of shoes. Memories surged within her. 30 years old, signing her first fuel contract, only for the partner to look her in the eye and ask, "Can we meet the real boss?" They did not believe a black woman owned the company. She had swallowed that humiliation, but never forgot. And now history repeated itself, this time in front of a crowd. "Do you have proof of payment?" Heather aimed the question like a blade. "The original method. We need the card used." A disguised accusation. Not "we need procedure," but "maybe you stole." Naomi caught the snicker behind her. She probably used someone else's company card. The wave of whispers rose higher. Every stare became a public trial. Captain Marcus Hargrove glanced at the clock again. 6 minutes left. If you don't comply, we'll have to send this flight without you. Naomi turned, her gaze fixed on him. Her eyes were cold as steel, but her voice was calm and smooth. No, you're not going anywhere. The words made Marcus falter for an instant, but he quickly buried his hesitation in rigidity. Call security. The moment the word security left his mouth, the air cracked open. A young woman in line raised her phone high, whispering into her mic. They're blocking a black woman, even though the scanner showed green 4 times. I'm going live. The green glow of her phone reflected across Naomi's face. In that instant, she knew. The story had left Gate A12. It was online now, and from there, no one could control it. Heather scanned again. Beep, green. Her face flushed crimson, a forced smile cracking under the weight. We need to call headquarters for verification, Heather stammered. Headquarters where? Naomi's voice was even. Customer service, Heather muttered. Naomi's lips curled slightly. Go ahead. But I know exactly who controls this flight. Marcus exhaled sharply, whispering with Heather, clearly trying to stall, hoping Naomi would tire, step aside, or surrender in silence. But Naomi stood still, tall as a tower. Her calm was resistance itself. A suited man in the line behind snapped. I paid to be on time. Don't let one person delay us. A few voices joined. That's right. Move her aside. Naomi turned. She did not shout. She did not point. She spoke one sentence, clear and deliberate. You are not delayed because of me, but because of prejudice. The crowd stirred. Some fell silent, eyes lowered. Others exhaled in frustration. But the truth had been spoken, and it hung in the air like a weight above them all. Marcus stepped closer, his tone hard. You are holding up this flight. Do you want us to call the police? Naomi slowly drew her phone from her blazer pocket. Not a card, not a ticket app. She opened her contacts and pressed a number marked only by 3 letters and an airport code. Good morning, her calm voice carried. This is Naomi Ellington. Connect me to the Network Operations Center. We have an urgent service safety issue at Gate A12. The air froze. Heather frowned, confused. Marcus stiffened, sweat forming at his brow. A man in line whispered, Who is she? Naomi closed her phone and looked at the clock. 5 minutes left. The crowd still had no idea. Heather still thought she held control. But Naomi knew the truth. One call from her was enough to keep this Boeing on the ground, no matter how badly the pilot wanted to take off. Heather swallowed hard, stammering. Who did you just call? Naomi smiled, her eyes glinting like a blade drawn from its sheath. The one even your captain must wait for. The gate was no longer just a checkpoint. It had become a battlefield, and Naomi had just made her first move. The familiar sound rang out for the 5th time. Beep green. The scanner remained loyal to the truth, but Heather Connolly did not. Her face twisted with frustration, yet her voice strained to sound calm. We will contact headquarters. You have to wait. Naomi Ellington did not move. Her black hair was tied neatly, her gaze sharp as a blade, her posture upright in front of Gate A12. She was silent, but that silence made the line behind her noisier than ever. A young woman pulled out her phone, whispering, 5 green scans already, and she's still blocked. I'm live streaming this. Her fingers moved quickly. The screen lit up. The words Live 56 viewers appeared in the corner. Within minutes, the number leapt. 1,000, then 5,000. Comments flooded down like a waterfall. This is clear discrimination. She's so calm, so dignified. Anyone at JFK right now? Confirm this. Naomi heard the whispers ripple. Who is she really? She knew. The fire had spread beyond the glass walls of the terminal. Captain Marcus Hargrove masked his unease with sternness. He glanced at the clock. 4 minutes left. He leaned close to Heather, his voice low but clear enough for Naomi to hear. Just hold her. If she doesn't step aside, call security. We cannot be late. Heather nodded, her palms slick with sweat, but her voice remained defiant. Do you have your payment card? I need to verify. Naomi locked eyes with her, her voice light as air, but cold as steel. No, you already have everything. The problem is not procedure, it is perception. The words cut deep. The crowd stirred. Some nodded. Others murmured. That's true. At the end of the line, a young man with curly hair raised his phone, speaking straight into the camera. You see this? Green scans clearly valid, yet she's still stopped. This is racism. The live stream passed 20,000 viewers, red hearts, comments, and the hashtag #GateA12 began to appear. Marcus realized the atmosphere had slipped beyond his control. He stepped forward, voice rigid. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. This is a first-class security issue. But before he could finish, a passenger in seat 1C, suited and polished, stood up. Security! She's scanned 5 times. We're the ones being delayed. Applause broke out in pockets. The crowd was divided, but support for Naomi was growing clearer. Heather's face burned red, her voice nearly a shout. If you don't step aside, I will call the police. Naomi tilted her head slightly, pulling out her phone again. A 3-letter name appeared on the screen. NOC, Network Operations Center. She pressed. A crisp, clear voice answered instantly. Good morning, Mrs. Ellington. We've received the alert. Your command? Both Heather and Marcus froze. The crowd stared in shock. A man whispered, My God, she knows NOC. Naomi's reply was soft, yet each word struck like a hammer. Hold refueling for Flight 91 until I confirm service standards are met. Marcus's eyes widened, his heart pounding. He understood instantly. No refueling meant no takeoff. What did you just do? His voice cracked. Naomi closed the phone, her gaze serene. I only ensured you deliver the service first. Class passengers have paid for. The crowd erupted. A young boy whispered, She can stop the whole flight. In that moment, the wall of silence shattered. Voices buzzed, cameras rolled, the glow of dozens of phones all pointed at Naomi. The live stream surged past 50,000 viewers, comments exploding. Someone find out who she is. This kind of power isn't normal. We are watching history. Heather faltered, still trying to project strength. We will contact corporate. Naomi's lips curved faintly. Go ahead. But remember, I'm the one who signs your fuel contracts. Marcus stepped back, sweat trickling down his temple. He was beginning to understand, but too late. The crowd had already seen the tremor in his clenched hands. Naomi stood unmoved, her eyes steady like the sky before a storm. Outside, a plane roared its engines preparing for takeoff. But inside, Flight 91 was pinned to the ground by a woman they had dismissed only minutes earlier. The woman they thought unworthy of Seat 1A was, in fact, the lifeline of the entire airline. And social media, like fire meeting wind, was transforming a dispute at the gate into a storm fierce enough to sweep across the entire aviation industry. The number of online viewers exploded like a tidal wave. In just 10 minutes, more than 150,000 people were watching as Naomi Ellington was blocked despite her boarding pass, scanning green again and again. Comments poured in. This is clearly racism. She's unnervingly calm, definitely not an ordinary passenger. Someone find out who she is immediately. Heather Connolly heard the whispers, but her stubbornness only hardened. She stood in the way, her voice sharp. We will need to contact management. You should cooperate. Naomi did not respond. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the clock on the wall. 3 minutes until the boarding gate closed. Time tightened like a noose. In the crowd, a young passenger whispered into his phone, I'm live streaming this. Look, the scanner shows green, but they're still holding her back. I can't believe it. His screen glowed red with the words, Live, 200,000 viewers. Elsewhere, a businesswoman in a tailored suit filmed the scene and instantly posted to Twitter. A woman of color blocked at JFK despite a valid ticket. Hashtag flying while black. Within minutes, her post had over 10,000 shares. Captain Marcus Hargrove tried to steady his voice with authority. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are handling this for the safety of the flight. But as soon as he finished, an older man in line shouted, Safety! It scanned green 5 times. You're making us late. Voices of agreement rose. A group of passengers clapped loudly, delivering a collective verdict against Heather and Marcus. Naomi drew a deep breath. She did not shout. She did not argue. She spoke with calm clarity, her voice carrying like a declaration. The problem is not the ticket. The problem is your perception. A wave of silence swept through. Her words were not only for Heather and Marcus, but for everyone who had doubted, who had chuckled, who had believed she did not belong. At the operations hotline, the information had already leaked. The Network Operations Center, the place Naomi had just called, had received her order to hold refueling for Flight 91. A technician on the tarmac whispered to a colleague, Someone locked the refueling command. This plane isn't going anywhere. That news quickly reached the airline's crisis room. A massive screen displayed a red alert. Flight 91, fuel hold, pending clearance. Executives stared at one another, pale-faced. They did not yet fully understand, but they knew something was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, the live stream crossed 500,000 viewers. A 10-second clip of the scanner flashing green, while Heather blocked Naomi spread across Instagram Reels, TikTok, and Twitter. Captions exploded. They're stopping her. even though her ticket is valid. Comments rained in. I've been treated like this too. We can't stay silent anymore. Tag CNN. Tag BBC. Heather trembled, but forced herself to stand firm. She gritted her teeth. If you don't cooperate, I will call the police immediately. Naomi turned her phone slowly in her hand, its glow casting across her serene face. She smiled faintly, sharp as a blade's edge. Go ahead. But before they arrive, the whole world will know what's happening here. Marcus Hargrove could no longer hide his unease. He wiped sweat from his forehead and whispered, Who are you really? Naomi looked straight into his eyes. The calm steel in her gaze made him afraid. I am the one who, with a single order, can keep your plane from leaving the ground. Her words cracked like thunder in the narrow space of Gate A12. The crowd erupted. A few whispered urgently into their phones. She must be someone high, level. This is huge. At airline headquarters, phones rang non-stop. A PR manager shouted, "This video just hit 1 million views. Reporters are calling non-stop. We need a statement immediately." But the CEO slammed the table. No! Find out who she is first. None of them yet knew they were not dealing with just a passenger. They were facing the chairwoman of the corporation that held the majority of their fuel contracts. At Gate A12, Naomi did not move. The clock ticked forward another minute. 2 minutes until the gate closed. Hundreds of phones were raised, millions of eyes watching through screens. Heather Connolly's face had gone pale. Marcus Hargrove stammered. Naomi remained, unshaken, like a steel tower, letting the world see the truth. A black woman who had paid for seat 1A was being stopped simply because they did not believe she belonged there. And the storm, this time, was no longer in the airline's hands. It belonged to the public. Because in the next 60 seconds, it would not only be Flight 91 held back. An entire industry would be forced to face the mirror Naomi had just raised. The clock on the wall ticked past the 1-minute mark before boarding closed. The air in the waiting area was so heavy it seemed you could hear the second hand scraping against the silence. Marcus Hargrove stood frozen. He had flown for 20 years, but he had never been stopped by a woman armed with nothing more than a phone call. Heather Connolly's face had gone pale, yet she tried to hold up a shell of pride. Security is on the way. She will have to leave. Naomi Ellington tilted her head slightly, her eyes glowing with a cold calm. No, Heather. This flight is not going anywhere. A chime rang from the phone she had placed face up on the counter. The screen lit brightly, displaying the words, "NOC, incoming call." The crowd erupted. A man whispered, his voice trembling. "Noki? That's the Network Operations Center. Could it be?" Naomi lifted the phone, her voice steady and clear. "Yes, I confirm. Maintain the fuel hold on Flight 91. Not a single engine starts until I say so." She set the phone back down. The only sound was the pounding hearts of those standing across from her. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He stammered, "You. Who are you?" Naomi turned, the light from dozens of phones reflecting across her face. Her voice carried, each word sharp and deliberate. "I am Dr. Naomi Ellington, chairwoman of Ellington Aviation Group, My corporation supplies over 80% of your fuel across the entire East Coast." The declaration cracked like lightning in clear skies. The crowd roared, some clapping, others covering their mouths in shock. The live stream surged instantly, 1.5 million viewers. Comments poured like a flood. "She's the one behind the fuel contracts." "My God, they stopped the CEO right at the boarding gate of her own industry." "This is history." Heather staggered, the scanner falling to the floor with a sharp clang. She stared at Naomi, her lips trembling. No, it can't be." Naomi leaned closer, her voice quiet but loud enough for all to hear. "You just blocked the woman responsible for every drop of fuel in these planes. Think about what that means." Marcus felt his legs chained in place. Sweat streamed down his temples. He understood. This was not about a single flight, nor a single contract. It was the threat of collapse for the entire airline. At headquarters, phones rang like thunder. A giant screen displayed an urgent warning. "Social media escalation, Flight 91, trending worldwide." The head of PR shouted, #flying. "While black is now top 5 globally, reporters are calling non-stop. CNN is preparing to cut live." The airline's CEO jumped to his feet, his face ashen. "Who is she?" A data analyst cried out. "Naomi Ellington. She's the one who signed all of our fuel contracts." The room fell silent. The CFO's hands shook around his pen as he muttered, "If she pulls those contracts, we lose everything." Back at gate A12, Naomi raised her head high. She was no longer just a passenger humiliated. She was the woman holding the keys to the airline's fate. "You want to call security?" Naomi said, her voice calm but each word cutting like a blade. "Go ahead. But before they arrive, this flight will be grounded. Your stock will plunge, and the billion-dollar deal you are chasing will fly out the window." The crowd erupted. A passenger in a suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She holds the entire airline industry in her hands." The live stream hit 3 million live viewers. Twitter exploded with headlines. "Female CEO brings airline to a halt at the gate." Heather faltered, desperation on her face. I was just following procedure." Naomi looked at her, eyes piercing through every layer of self-defense. "No, you weren't following procedure. You were following your prejudice. And now, you will learn what accountability means." Marcus Hargrove bowed his head, his hands trembling. He knew his career had just fallen off a cliff. In the airline's crisis room, the CEO slammed his hand against the table. "We must control this story now. If not, we lose everything." But the truth was already clear. The story no longer belonged to them. It was spreading beyond, owned by millions. Naomi stood still, exhaling slowly. Every eye, every raised phone, carved a truth into stone. The woman they had dismissed was the one who kept their planes in the air. And Naomi knew this was only the beginning. Because once the storm of public outrage had risen, it would not stop at one flight. It would sweep away an entire system. In the moment Naomi Ellington declared her name, the world seemed to stop. Gate A12 fell silent, then erupted like a stadium. Shouts, applause, and jeers collided. Phones buzzed non-stop. The live stream surged past 5 million live viewers. Heather Connolly stumbled back, her hands shaking so violently she could no longer hold the scanner. Her face drained of all color, as if she had just watched her job vanish beneath her feet. Marcus Hargrove bowed his head, his lips stammering soundlessly. At headquarters, the crisis room was in chaos. CNN blared on the screen, the headline scrolling, "Fuel Industry, CEO Denied First, Class Boarding by Airline." The head of PR screamed, his voice while breaking, "We're live! They're reporting it right now!" The CEO slammed his fist on the table. "Shut down all social media channels. Issue an emergency statement." But the CFO cut in, pale and shaken. "It's too late. Shares have dropped 6% in just 15 minutes. Investors are fleeing." An advisor whispered, "And don't forget, next week we sign a $1 billion deal with Global Air. If they see this..." No one dared finish the thought. The shadow of bankruptcy hung over the room like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, at gate A12, Naomi stood still, the eye of the storm. A young passenger whispered into his live stream. She only needed one phone call, and this airline dropped to its knees. This isn't about a seat. This is real power. Comments poured across the screen. "This woman is saving all of us. This is a lesson for every airline. Never underestimate a passenger." Marcus summoned what little courage he had, stepping toward Naomi, his voice hoarse. "Ms. Ellington, I am sorry. But you must understand, we were only trying to ensure safety." Naomi turned, her gaze cutting through him. "Safety? The scanner flashed green 5 times, and still you called me a threat." "No, Captain. What you were protecting was not safety. It was prejudice." The crowd roared, applause thundering like a storm. Heather buried her face in her hands, her whole body trembling. On Wall Street, trading algorithms caught the keywords Naomi Ellington, fuel contracts, airline, and triggered a sell-off. Within 30 minutes, the airline's market value was in free fall, more than $1.2 billion erased. Financial networks flashed headlines. "Crisis at JFK threatens entire airline industry." In the crowd, a freelance journalist named Emma Royce quickly opened Twitter and posted a clip. "Naomi Ellington, Fuel Group chairwoman, blocked at gate A12. She declares, 'Not an engine starts until I say so.'" Within 20 minutes, the post had hit 100,000 retweets. CNN, BBC, Reuters, all requested permission to use the footage. Marcus whispered to Heather, "We've lost control. This is beyond us now." Heather sobbed. I was only following procedure." Naomi heard her clearly. She turned back, her voice calm but sharp as steel. "No, Heather. You were following your fear and your arrogance, and today you are paying the price." At headquarters, the CEO shouted into his phone, "I need to know right now what she wants. If not, we lose the entire company." The reply from the other end was chilling. "She hasn't demanded anything. She is just standing there, in silence." The room went dead quiet. That silence was more terrifying than any ultimatum. At gate A12, Naomi raised her eyes to the hundreds of phones recording, her voice carrying, each word sharp and deliberate. "You think power belongs to the one blocking the gate. But true power is when I decide whether this plane leaves the ground." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. The live stream hit 8 million live viewers. Heather collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Marcus turned away, trying to hide his despair. Naomi stood unmoving, a monument in flesh and blood. In that moment, the entire world understood. A woman once dismissed had just forced an entire airline industry to bow its head. It was not only a single flight that had been grounded. The stock market, the industry, and global public opinion were all revolving around one woman standing at Gate A12. And Naomi knew this was only the beginning of the fight for dignity. Gate A12 was no longer a boarding line. It had become a stage where the entire world was watching. The live stream surged past 10 million live viewers. On Twitter, hashed Gate A12 and #flying. While black dominated the global trending list, Naomi Ellington stood still, as if she were the very center of the universe. The glow of phones reflected across her face, turning it into a symbol of calm in the storm. At airline headquarters, the CEO slumped into his chair, his voice hoarse. "What do we do? If we lose Ellington Aviation Group, the entire East Coast shuts down." The CFO's tone was sharp. "We've lost $2 billion in market value in 40 minutes. Investors are calling non-stop. They demand answers." A PR advisor held up a screen. "Naomi Ellington has made no demands yet. But the global audience is waiting. If she speaks, it will be our sentence." Back at Gate A12, Captain Marcus Hargrove finally found the courage to step forward. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Missile Ellington, please, allow this flight to take off. We will apologize. We will compensate you." Naomi turned, her gaze not angry, but cold and sharp as forged steel. "Compensate? Do you think I am standing here for a meal voucher or an empty apology?" The crowd gasped. A passenger whispered, "She doesn't need money. She wants something bigger." Naomi inhaled, her voice rising, clear and deliberate. "You want this flight to depart? You want to stop your stock from collapsing? You want to save the billion-dollar contract dangling over your heads? Then promise me. No. Promise everyone watching that you will change." Marcus froze. Heather, sitting collapsed in a chair, snapped her head up, her face pale. Naomi stepped forward, her stance unyielding, her voice firm. "I want transparent procedures, public reporting of every discrimination complaint. I want mandatory bias training for every employee, from flight attendants to captains. I want immediate disciplinary action for anyone who repeats what I endured this morning." The crowd erupted in applause. Shouts of "yes" filled the waiting area. The live stream hit 12 million viewers, comments flooding in. "This is more than a seat. This is a revolution. She is rewriting the rules of aviation. Naomi Ellington is a name I will never forget." At headquarters, the CEO trembled as he clutched his phone, whispering to an advisor, "If we don't accept, we die today." The CFO shook his head, his voice breaking. "It's not if, it's when. She is forcing us to decide in front of the world." A PR director broke into tears. "We no longer control this. This isn't a media crisis. This is a public trial." Marcus drew a deep breath, bowing his head before Naomi. "Miss Ellington, I will relay this to headquarters, but please let the other passengers board first. They are restless." Naomi's gaze was steady, her tone even. "No one boards this plane until I hear a formal commitment. Remember, your fuel is still locked. This aircraft does not leave the ground without me." Heather trembled, leaping to her feet, screaming in desperation. "She's threatening the whole company. This is blackmail." Naomi spun toward her, her icy gaze freezing Heather in place. "Blackmail is when you use power to humiliate others. I ask nothing for myself. I demand what should have always existed, dignity for every passenger." Applause thundered again. Heather collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. In the crisis room, the CEO finally exhaled. "We must yield. If not, we have no future." An assistant rushed out, placing an urgent call to Gate A12. A trembling voice echoed through the speaker. "Dr. Ellington, headquarters is ready to sign the commitment now." Naomi smiled faintly, a delicate smile carrying the weight of an entire industry. She stood tall, boarding pass in hand, her voice ringing through the gate. "Good. Remember, this is not an agreement with me. This is an agreement with justice, and the world is our witness." From a passenger who had been dismissed, Naomi had turned herself into the judge of an entire system. But in her eyes, another spark glimmered. This battle had only just begun. The crackling voice of the loudspeaker echoed across Gate A12, drowning out the murmurs of hundreds of passengers. "Dr. Ellington, headquarters has agreed to sign the commitment. We are ready to proceed immediately." The entire line of passengers held their breath. The live stream spiked. 15 million people watching live. Comments surged like waves. "History in front of our eyes. She forced an entire corporation to surrender." "Naomi Ellington. Remember that name." Naomi did not move. She let the concession hang in the air, tightening the airline's unease like a rope around their neck. Captain Marcus Hargrove whispered, his voice pleading, "Ellington, they have agreed. Please, let this flight depart. The passengers are getting anxious." Naomi turned her head, her gaze silent but cutting. "Anxious? They've only been anxious for a few minutes. People like me have endured it for a lifetime." Her words slashed through the silence. The crowd went still, then erupted in applause, loud and unified. At headquarters, the CEO stood frozen, his eyes vacant. A PR director slammed the table, shouting, "No more silence! Read the statement now, right now, so the entire world hears." The spokesperson hurriedly drafted a few lines, their voice shaking as they read live on camera. "Our airline formally commits to implementing a comprehensive anti-discrimination program. We will publicly report all complaints, mandate training, and enforce immediate discipline for any violations." Subtitles rolled automatically across passengers' phones. Applause thundered through Gate A12. Naomi gave a slight nod, a smile thin as a blade. Her voice rang clear for millions to hear. "Good. But remember this. Justice does not come from promises, it comes from oversight, and I will be the one overseeing you." The crowd erupted in cheers. The live stream hit 20 million viewers. Heather Connolly sat collapsed in a chair, her face buried in her hands. She knew her life had just fallen apart. The words "people like her," the phrase she had carelessly uttered earlier, were now headline fodder, the clip replayed hundreds of times across the internet. Marcus Hargrove remained silent, his shoulders trembling. He had once believed he held the power in the cockpit. But now everyone could see the truth. The real power stood outside, in the hands of the woman he had once dismissed. In Washington, a senator tweeted, "When a fuel CEO is stopped at a boarding gate because of her skin color, no passenger is safe from prejudice. A hearing is coming." Over 300,000 shares in 1 hour. Political pressure crashed down on the airline like a flood. Naomi slowly raised her phone so everyone could see the screen glowing with the words, "Fuel hold active, Flight 91. She spoke calmly but with weight. "This plane is still not taking off. I want this commitment not just read in a boardroom, but signed in writing, published openly for the entire industry to see." The crowd roared in support. A passenger shouted, "That's right! Sign it!" Headquarters had no choice. Within 10 minutes, the official declaration appeared on the airline's website. "We apologize to Dr. Naomi Ellington and all passengers. The airline will implement a comprehensive reform program on equity and anti-discrimination." News networks broadcast it instantly, subtitles scrolling, "Airline bows to fuel CEO." Naomi scanned the statement on her phone and nodded. At last, she pressed the button. A notification appeared. "Fuel hold released. Flight 91 cleared." Marcus nearly buckled from relief. Heather buried her face and sobbed. Passengers cheered, applause shaking the terminal. But Naomi did not smile. Her eyes drifted far away, as if piercing through the glass roof of the airport to the sky beyond, where she saw something greater. The battle had only begun. In the crisis room, the CEO dropped his head into his hands and whispered, "We have surrendered, but the cost will be far greater than this." And as he feared, Naomi Ellington was not stopping at one flight. She had opened a new chapter, one where the entire airline industry would be forced to confront its true face. Naomi had not only secured justice for herself, she had turned humiliation into the foundation for reform. Gate A12 would go down in history, the place where one woman stood tall, and the world was forced to change. When Naomi Ellington lifted her hand from the phone, Flight 91 was finally released. But what had just happened did not end there. It had only begun. Gate A12 had transformed into a historic landmark. Passengers streamed onto the plane, but many turned back to look, some whispering, "We just witnessed a revolution." The live stream hit 25 million live viewers before ending. Short clips flooded every platform: TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter, Facebook. Each video carried the same caption: "The woman who made an airline bow." On Wall Street, the shock was seismic. The airline stock chart bled red. In 2 hours, $3.4 billion in market value vanished. Financial networks rushed in with sensational headlines: "The A12 crisis, airline in free fall. One call wipes out billions." Furious investors sent emails, made calls, demanding answers before dawn. In Washington, Congress erupted. A black congressman stepped out of session and spoke bluntly into the cameras. "What happened to Dr. Naomi Ellington is not an isolated incident. It is the product of entrenched prejudice. And we will launch an emergency hearing on discrimination in the airline industry." His words spread like a storm. News outlets replayed them alongside the clip of Naomi at Gate A12. "Power does not lie in the hands of the one blocking the gate. Power lies in the hands of the one who decides whether the plane takes off." Meanwhile, rival airlines smelled blood. Delta immediately issued a statement. "We affirm that every passenger deserves respect. Our airline is implementing mandatory anti-bias training across the entire system." United scrambled to run an ad on Twitter. "Every passenger belongs here." JetBlue released a video showing flight attendants bowing to a diverse group of passengers, the caption reading, "Dignity is not optional." In her quiet Manhattan apartment, Naomi sat by the window, staring down at the blur of city lights. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Reporters, politicians, investors, even competitors. But she stayed silent, answering none. In her ears still echoed the words of a passenger leaving the gate. "You didn't just hold back a flight, you held on to our trust." Naomi closed her eyes. Her heart was not joyful, but heavy, because she knew a larger storm was coming. At airline headquarters, the crisis manager slammed a report onto the table, his voice trembling. "CNN is broadcasting this story live around the clock. Rivals have turned it into a PR weapon. Congress is pressing non-stop. We are no longer just an airline. We are the symbol of discrimination." The CEO sat lifeless, his face ashen. A legal director whispered, "The lawyers are warning we could face a class action lawsuit from passengers." All eyes dropped, and together they understood. The blade hanging above had finally fallen. On social media, the hashtags kept spreading. At Gate A12. Flying while black. Dignity matters. Every minute brought thousands of new stories from users. "I was doubted when I lined up for first class. I was asked for extra documents even though my ticket was clear. I too have heard the words, 'people like you.'" Naomi had unleashed a flood. It was no longer about one person. It had become a movement. CNN's evening news opened with the anchor's voice. "In just 9 minutes at Gate A12, one woman forced an entire industry to tremble. Naomi Ellington, a name now synonymous with resistance and justice." The screen showed Naomi standing firm before Heather and Marcus, the glow of phones encircling her like a halo. A commentator exclaimed, "This is the photograph of the century." Heather Connolly, in her small apartment, collapsed into a chair as her TV replayed the moment she shouted, "People like her." Tears streamed down her face. Those 4 words had become her sentence, and the whole world was the jury. Marcus Hargrove, sitting in a shabby pilot's lodge, stared at his trembling hands. Years of flying, thousands of hours in the cockpit, all erased by a few minutes at Gate A12. He knew. His career was over. And Naomi, in the quiet of the night, asked herself, "Is a commitment enough? Or does it demand a complete overhaul?" She knew the answer. Not enough. And so a new light burned in her eyes. The spark of a larger plan. From a passenger humiliated, Naomi had become a torch. And that torch was not only illuminating Gate A12, it was setting fire to the rotting walls of an entire industry. 2 weeks after the events at Gate A12, Naomi Ellington stepped onto the stage of a packed auditorium, blinding lights shining down on her. In front of her sat hundreds of journalists, cameras clicking non-stop, flashes bursting like lightning. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the words, "Aviation Justice Summit, Global Broadcast." Online, millions were waiting. Major outlets, CNN, BBC, Reuters, all cut to live coverage. The hashtag #GateA12 once again claimed the #1 spot worldwide. Naomi drew a deep breath, her voice carrying across the hall, calm yet commanding. "I once stood before a gate, holding a valid first-class ticket, and was treated like an intruder. Not because of the ticket, but because they believed I did not belong there. But today, we stand here to declare every passenger belongs." The hall erupted with applause. Millions on the live stream typed comments in unison. "Yes! Naomi speaks for us. A revolution born from a boarding pass." In one corner of the hall, the airline's CEO hung his head, his face gaunt. Beside him, the comprehensive reform agreement was unveiled. $10 million for anti-bias training programs, quarterly public reports, and the creation of an independent oversight committee. Naomi turned, her voice sharp as steel. "This is not a favor. This is responsibility. And from now on, that responsibility will no longer hide in the shadows, but under the light of the entire world." At the same time in Washington, Congress broadcast the first ever hearing on discrimination in the airline industry. The clip of Naomi standing tall at Gate A12 was replayed on loop, serving as living proof of the need for change. A senator declared, "Not everyone has the power of Dr. Ellington, but if she could be treated this way, what is happening to millions of ordinary passengers?" Applause thundered, not only in the congressional chamber, but across every social platform. Meanwhile, Heather Connolly and Marcus Hargrove faced their reckoning. Heather was fired on the spot, class action lawsuits from passengers piled up on lawyers' desks. The 4 words, "people like her," had become an inescapable sentence, following her like a mark etched onto her forehead. In her small apartment, she locked her doors, avoiding neighbors' eyes. The television replayed the moment she blocked Naomi. Heather collapsed, whispering in despair, "1 minute of prejudice destroyed my entire life." Marcus, once a captain with 20 years of flight experience, had his license revoked. Journalists uncovered data showing he had removed black passengers from first class 3 times more often than white passengers. His son called, voice choked, "Dad, my friends are asking if it's true. I don't know what to say." Marcus said nothing. For him, that silence cut deeper than any ruling. Naomi did not celebrate. She did not boast of victory. Instead, she founded the Ellington Initiative, scholarships, training, and research, so the next generation entering aviation would not face the gates of prejudice she once did. In a private meeting with advisors, she said, "Power is not for revenge. Power is for planting seeds. One day, we will sit in the shade of trees we plant today." The hall fell silent as Naomi ended her speech. Her voice was gentle, yet sharper than any blade. "I do not need an apology. I need change. And today, we have begun. But do not mistake this as the end. This is only the first step. If one airline can be forced to bow, then the entire industry will kneel before justice. The applause was deafening. The live stream peaked at 40 million viewers worldwide. A new hashtag emerged. #Dignity is non-negotiable. At JFK Airport, a young passenger stood silently, staring at the now empty gate A12. He whispered, "That day, we saw a woman being stopped. But today, the whole world sees a symbol standing tall." Naomi Ellington, once humiliated before everyone's eyes, had transformed shame into legacy. And from gate A12, history had been rewritten, not just for her, but for all those who had ever been told to step aside. In the world of aviation, a boarding pass that seemed so small became the spark that set an entire industry ablaze. Naomi Ellington proved that true power does not rest in first-class seats, nor in the hands of those who guard the gates. Power lies in the courage to stand still, to say no, and to turn silence into thunder. If you believe that dignity is never something to be bargained for, hit like to spread this message. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next stories, where justice arrives in the most unexpected moments. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment with just 3 words, "No step back," so the world will see that we will never accept retreat in the face of injustice.